Okay, so we are nearing the end of the 7th point. Depending on how much I talk tonight, we might actually make it. But I suspect we'll wrap up next week. Yeah, we're currently in the 7th point. It's really the practices of how we engage in Lojong. And so these are our day-to-day life, just healthy practices that we want to engage in. Similarly, as I've mentioned, to a doctor telling you, if you want to get healthier, here's the diet you should, take, the medicine or the supplements that you want to engage in, so that as you engage in your practice, these are these practices that are really important to supplement how we live our lives. And so we've been going through them. There's 20 of them in the 7th point. And I think the context I just want to give as we touch them, because all the rest of these are going to have a very clear context of remembering why we're doing Dharma practice. Because I think that this whole point of a trajectory, if we're really not rooted in where we're going, why we're going there, and what the real source problem is, sometimes this is just stuff that is good advice. And we forget that, in fact, we're creating a real prison in our own lives that are just stuck in every fear, worry, concern. We're habitually caught up in this wheel, like a hamster, just doing the same things over and over again. We're falling into habits and tendencies and ways of thinking and seeing the world. And we're just really compelled to do it without any real realization that I don't have to be caught up in any of that. I can literally be liberated. I don't need to have stress, worry, and fear. I don't need to be caught up in anxiety or feel less than. I don't need to be traumatized by loss and grief. That I literally can be free of this wheel of rumination, of constant projection and habituation and literally projection of the world that I create, and to understand that I'm creating it, and that there's a key to unlock it. It's right there, and it's handed to us, and we'll talk about it, and we'll go, yeah, that makes so much sense. And then I go back out and I decorate samsara and build it up really well. And I get my nice house and my nice car and my nice dinner and my nice movie and my nice friends and my nice jacket. And I just keep recreating the source of all my suffering. And it's so subtle sometimes. And so one of the things is, how do we sustain a bit of realization? How do we sustain this idea that, instead of cultivating desire, I could actually be cultivating contentment? I mean, what a contrary thought. that right now, when we think about our lives, I'm pretty sure we could all come up with a bunch of things that we could improve our lives. Man, if only I had that, that'd be really nice. And then simultaneously, we could look at all the stuff we have in our lives and the incredible amount of luxury that we have. We're in a nice place here with heat. I've got a hot water here and clothing, and probably have some cars and vehicles, and we have food, and when you compare that to just 20 years ago, let alone 40 years ago, the resources and the luxury that we have compared to what our parents had or grandparents had, what people had to do just, the reason they called it an ice box is because you used to have a chunk of ice in there to keep your stuff cold. You used to have to really salt, meat and stuff. And yet, with all the gadgets, with all the luxury, do we have less stress or more stress in our lives? Do we have more distraction or less distraction? People used to sit down and actually write letters. Have long conversations. I have a friend who calls this the mystery killer. Because any question you want to know, hey, Google, what's that? And boom, it's up. And you would think that would make our lives so much better. And yet it's just the opposite effect. More distraction, more stress, more worry, more fear, more samsara that's being created. And so if we were to go back in the 7-point mind training, there's the preliminary practices of really understanding the nature of suffering and this rare opportunity that we have. We actually have a path of liberation. We have teachers who have traveled the path. We have, living in our time right now, teachers who can show you the way to be free of all of this. And we actually can watch a YouTube, as I mentioned, I think last night, of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama giving pith instructions on a path to enlightenment, and we might choose to watch Netflix instead. I mean, when you put it in context, it seems radically insane that I could watch a movie that I'll forget about in a week, or go to the new Star Wars, right? Or I could listen to, an incredibly enlightened being give me the direct instructions to eliminate all suffering and liberation from karmic imprints and mental afflictions. And I'll choose the other one. Why is that? And it's because we're habituated that way. And that's the thing to understand, that the reason we have these practices is because we're so habituated, even though we know at some level this is, really important. My mind can pretty quickly go, yeah, and we'll do that tomorrow. We'll do that tomorrow. Yeah, right now I'm going to go do Netflix. To say watching Netflix on occasion is not a bad thing, But the point is, what's the propensity of the amount of time and energy I spend in my day that is actually creating more desire, more attachment, and more affliction? And what's the proportion of my day that's actually devoted to understanding the nature of the cause of my suffering and how to attenuate that? How much time in my day do I actually reflect on how much abundance I have and cultivate contentment? I have more stuff than I can possibly eat. I mean, I bet most of us could go through our closets and get rid of some stuff, huh? But we'll be thinking about that other jacket because it's wintertime. And so it's in this context that we really want to look at these practices to start to notice that I'm going to need all the help and support I can get to really engage in this path, because what will, as our human nature is we're going to, oh yes, I go to a retreat, or I have a Dharma teaching, or I listen to a talk by His Holiness, or I've been listening to Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo, today's really great teachings that I think will show when I'm gone. This incredible, being that can just so clearly point out our habitual way of being and give us answers. And the thing is, there's a very straightforward path, and it's not even super complicated, but it's incredibly hard to do. It's like following the breath. There's not a lot of rocket science to that, is it? But how hard it is to just be on the breath for 24 minutes. Right? That could seem almost like a phenomenal feat. When I teach meditation a lot of times, I'll tell people count to 7, and we'll go through meditations, and they'll go like, I didn't even get to 3. I didn't even get to 3. Because our mind's not used to that. We're not even used to being around our own state of mind without music, without a radio, without the news, without something. or doing something, or just sitting and being. Like just sitting and being. Just sitting. That could be torture. It could literally be torture. To sit here quietly by myself, nothing to do, nothing? Can I read a book? Yeah. Have you ever gone to anybody's restroom and they don't have a bunch of magazines sitting next to the toilet? I mean, there's probably some people, but there's usually a stack, right? Like, it's a totally foreign concept for us to be alone with our own mind, our own awareness. And so that's what we're up against, because our mind's used to distraction, entertainment, something to do, grasping on. And so it's so habitual that we don't even notice it. We don't even notice how quickly we might, as soon as we start to do something, our mind will want to do something else. If I'm going to do the dishes, well, maybe I'll put on some music. If I'm going to, drive to somewhere. Can you imagine driving somewhere? So people ask me, what do you listen to when you drive? And I'm sitting there, nothing. Like, I drive to California. What you? Well, we talk. Really? With your wife the whole time? Yeah, we talk. And, it's... But that was not, I couldn't be in the car 10 minutes before without turn on radio, something going on. So when we're talking about these practices, all of these practices are going to constantly reorientate us to the path of liberation that's available to us at all times. It's that same thing that when we're at home, and you have to wait for something. Like wait for the coffee pot to finish. What am I going to do for 5 minutes while that thing finishes? Am I just going to stand here and look at the coffee pot? For 5 minutes? That'd be a while. I have a quick coffee pot. It makes it pretty fast. But what do I do for 5 minutes? What a waste of time if I were to just sit there and wait. I could be doing something, right? Maybe I get on the phone. Maybe I'll do a... What if I were to go, wow, I actually have 5 minutes to cultivate bodhicitta or compassion or think of others or say a few prayers for the benefit of all sentient beings? Well, that might be a good use of time. What if I were to just, I don't always have time to meditate. What if I was just aware of my feet on the floor and my breath that comes in my body? In other words, I could be, instead of having to wait and fill that space immediately, I might be able to use that space to be aware of my body, to be aware of the breath, to be aware of all the things that are going on in this moment that I'm not typically aware of, to become aware of my mind and thoughts that arise. Because this becomes the practice of eliminating all that mental afflictions. I can actually be spending that time attenuating a busy, obsessive, compulsive, grasping mind. And just, what's it feel like to be uncomfortable and want to do something and not do it? What's that like? But it rarely occurs to us because we just, coffee can get done, I'm going to do something else, I got to do this and that, and I'll come back for that or whatever. So if we don't have these practices, we will find that we will habitually just keep recreating the same conditions that actually create more busyness and grasping and obsessiveness in our own minds. And it's going on all day long, but we're not aware of it because we're just doing it habitually. So we need to break the habit. That's where these practices help. So we're in this seventh point of these practices, and we're on the don't be contrary. There's 6 ways of being contrary in here, and so these are great pithy points here of ways that we can be contrary. And I think you may notice with this context of how our mind will be this way. So 6 different examples of contrariness that we want to avoid. And the first is contrary patience. Contrary patience. So we may have no patience for any type of discomfort or frustration that comes in the course of our Dharma practice. That could be pretty irritating. I have to sit for 24 minutes and I don't have my right cushion, or I don't have that, and there's noise outside, or, I'm supposed to say prayers tonight, or I'm supposed to do my purification practice, or, that's a big effort. Like, it can actually be an effort. I mean, I've had where it's an effort for me, like to have to go upstairs and go through my sadhana practice, like, man, I gotta go do that before I can go to sleep. Rather than I have the opportunity to engage in a sadhana practice of which I have a lineage that was passed down to me by these incredible gurus, of a way of awakening my mind for the benefit of all sentient beings, and I could be doing that for the next 20 minutes. And my mind will tell me, oh man, I gotta go do that again. My mind will still do that, and I have to physically, as I walk up the stairs, shift my energy. I mean, mentally and physically. As I step upstairs, I really shift as I'm walking up there. The idea that, wow, what a gift it is to have this opportunity. But it's an effort, So, but sometimes we don't have patience for that. We don't have patience to go meditate. We don't have patience really, I have to go sit for 20 minutes, really? Man. And yet, I have plenty of grit and forbearance for protecting my friends or putting down my enemies. I've got patience for engaging in all kinds of other activities, things that I'll do that'll, make me feel good. And here, they're talking specifically about, I'll go to any lengths to do things to, and this, he's given a very specific thing about friends, to protect them and to help them and to do those types of things in an unhealthy way, and to put down enemies to make sure that they get theirs. How many times we'll just call and make that extra effort to make sure somebody gets in trouble, or or what they did to us. Tenzin Palma was pointing out someone who had written to her about a woman who had written to her and about how she had kind of lost her house due to a transaction and some things that weren't done properly, and that it was kind of robbed from her, and how she's going to get it back, and the difficulties, and just the resentment and the struggle to have this, and then at the end of the letter she realized that it happened 30 years ago. So for 30 years she's holding this. So she had a lot of patience and a lot of forbearance around gonna get that, gonna get them. And we'll have that with people in our lives. But how much patience do we have when we have to go sit for 20 minutes? So it's a contrary patience. We have patience for things that aren't very healthy for us in the long term. And we'll stick it out. We'll make sure they'll get theirs. They're not getting away with this. I don't care if I have to be on hold for an hour. I'll be on hold for an hour because I'm going to talk to their boss. But you want me to wait 20 minutes to meditate? No. Maybe I'll do 10. So see how that patience, suddenly I have forbearance, I have grit, So that's one example. The second example is contrary aspiration. So we have a lot of aspiration to do a lot of things in life. So I point out a lot of times how much we'll do to get a college degree, to get a good job. I mean, we have a lot of aspiration, a lot of intention. We'll work really hard. We'll stay up late. We'll study. We'll do all types of things. But I may not have the aspiration to purify unwholesome imprints in my own mind stream. I may not have the aspiration to collect merit, to cultivate wisdom, transform my mind and my heart. That's a lot more effort, it seems. And yet, in order to get that year-long ski pass, I'll work pretty hard for that. What will I do for an aspiration of being well known or having a certain stature? So contrary aspiration is where my aspiration is focused on these worldly things, as opposed to the aspiration of transforming my mind, transforming this heart and mind, to eliminate and purify the mental afflicted states that I have. Well, that's a pretty good aspiration. I was talking to, so on Saturday we're going to have a special guest video live with us. She's a nun in India, and she runs the Tushita Center in New Delhi. And been delightful talking to her. She's going to visit with us. We'll have a special event on Saturday night. And, she had a long night. I knew the night before, and she had to write these some paper. And then she'd forgot she still needed to do practice. And we were talking about, we have certain practices we do every day. And, late at night, she already works hard. She runs the center. It's late at night. But the practice that she's not going to miss is Vajrasattva practice. It's purification. At the end of the day, we purify the negativities of the day. And, she just said, well, can't miss that. Can't miss that. That'd be insane to miss that. You can actually purify negativities in my mind stream. So she had the right kind of aspiration. Whereas, I might go, man, skip that tonight. But I'll stay up late to watch that comedy show. I got all kinds of energy for that. But do I have time and aspiration to bring to mind unwholesome mental states and develop intelligent regret, resolve, purify them? The third contrariness is a contrary experience, where we seek a wide variety of experiences of a totally mundane nature, but do not seek deeper experience in the spiritual domain. So that I think we can all relate to, right? Hey, what do you want to do? Go for a hike, go to Hawaii, go see Star Wars. By the way, I did go see Star Wars, for the record. We had a whole family night. So there's nothing wrong with going to a movie or seeking something. Again, we made that point earlier. There's a balance to what we engage in and why we engage in. What's our motivation? In our case, it's this sort of traditional thing. It's something that grandma and the kids and everybody can go together. It's a nice night out. And it's a good excuse for me to have popcorn, too. So, but how much do we spend time and energy seeking about all those worldly things that we could be doing versus the experience of what it would be like to actually still the mind? What it's like to really be able to engage in others in a way of holding the dependent arising of our interactions, or cultivating just merit of bodhicitta through how I interact with others, and deeper spiritual experience and noticing what happens when I shift my motivation when I interact with others, instead of being frustrated, to have patience, and what that's like. So deeper spiritual experiences isn't always a deep meditative state, but a deeper spiritual experience in understanding the interdependent nature of my interactions with others, and how they have effect on how I interact with people, and how that affects them, and what arises, and noticing impermanence as, thoughts and feelings, fears and concerns come and go. It's sometimes not so exciting to watch the impermanent nature of my emotions during the day, but Hawaii sounds pretty cool. And then, I've only been to the Kauai, I haven't been to the other island, So that other island, Big Island, I haven't been to that one. So constantly seeking other experiences, other worldly experiences, and as opposed to really seeking that deeper spiritual opportunity. And so that's a contrary experience, that I'm seeking all these outer mundane experiences, which, by the way, I say it all the time. We can look at all the wonderful, amazing experiences we've had in our lives. Did that ever set you free from pain, suffering, fear, insecurity, worry? But you know, my mind says, well, maybe the next one will. Maybe it's waiting for me in Kauai. Liberation. I get fascinated by how much time and energy and resources we'll put into going out to dinner or meals or activities where, often we'll spend, hundreds of dollars on something that's going to last about an hour. It might be very delicious for 20 minutes. But how much time and energy and resources am I putting into, just a practice that can last a lifetime? Which experiences where am I putting my time, energy, resources, finances? What's the difference between a $100,000 car and a $30,000 car? That fascinates me. It really does. I've never paid more than $7,500 for a car. And it starts. It's all-wheel drive. I have heated seats now. I always wanted heated seats. That was an experience I've been seeking. But when you think about $30,000 and $100,000, that's $70,000. Wow, what could you do with $70,000 to improve the world? Versus the difference between driving in a car like this or a car like that. I'm not totally up on prices of cars, but I think a $30,000 car ought to get you a new car, right? New one, I'm pretty sure, yeah. Side note, I'll digress for a moment. My fantasy car is a minivan. Laura won't let me have one, yeah. But one day I will be in the captain's chair of a minivan. It could happen. So the fourth contrary, if I keep digressing, we're never getting to this, is contrary compassion. And this is fascinating, where compassion, the contrary compassion is we have the, again, compassion sort of in this wrong place. And the way they put it here is where, a lot of times we don't feel sympathy for people that we see that are just suffering. People that we actually know who we might even have ill will rather than compassion for, because they're just miserable, they're unhappy, and they're struggling in some way. And rather than having compassion for them, we just think, well, they bring it upon themselves. Look at, they're always, look how they treat people, look how they do stuff, and we have no compassion. Say, well, why don't they get a job? Why don't they, change their behavior? Why don't they, And so we have no compassion for them, and they're actually suffering. And yet, we'll have compassion for some sincere Dharma practitioner who's on a path with a teacher, and you hear their struggles. He puts a story in here of this yogi that had been meditating for years above Dharamsala and spent about 6 years and was visiting, and when he was sharing his story about the hardships, the lack of food, the cold, the things that he had to endure, like everyone had all this compassion for him. And they're saying that's the wrong kind of compassion, because he's on a path to enlightenment. As a matter of fact, at the end of his what he shared was that 6 years of practice, those hardships, gave him a space of meditative stability that there's no difference in his life between post-meditation and meditation. Through that 6 years of enduring practice and hardship, he'd reached a state of equanimity, of clarity of mind, of stability of mind, shamatha, of no difference. His full on attention, just full on there, straight practice. But people feel sorry for him that he had to go through this effort. We have compassion, but that annoying neighbor, we got no compassion for them. The annoying neighbor is going to struggle. The annoying neighbor is not going to go to enlightenment. They have a much much bigger road to have to endure of path. I mean, when you think about it, the people that we really get frustrated by, when do they have peace? When do they have any happiness? When do they have any contentment? And are they even near anything that will actually point them to an opening of change, of transformation? That's where we should have some compassion, because they're really struggling. And that can go on for lifetimes of continuum. The person who's, having to go without a meal here or there, or, meditate for 18 hours a day and go on very simple, cold winters and things. Well, they're purifying their mind. They're on a path to, we rejoice. We rejoice in their opportunities. And also offer them a meal, too. That's a good thing. But our compassion is contrary when we have compassion literally for the people that we like and feel good about on a journey that's actually attenuating a path, that's attenuating afflictions and accumulating a path. So the point that they make here is that most of us are subject to suffering and its causes. That's just how we are. We can strive very hard for our own happiness, but without the wisdom of Dharma, this aspiration simply leads to more discontent and a wider variety of suffering. So when we see others out there that are on a path, we're sitting here and we're on a path, and think about how difficult it is to get out of that groove. Those people don't even know that there's another way. A lot of compassion can be there. The fifth example of contrariness is contrary concern. And that's where concerning ourselves not with Dharma practice, but simply with acquisition of wealth, protection of loved ones, overcoming our enemies, the affairs of this life. And we will, what are our big, and it's different than aspiration, it's concern. It's concern. Worldly concerns, because that's what concerns us. I'm really concerned whether this or that's going to happen. And if you look at all of our worldly concerns, if we look at the things that we stress and worry about, how much is it that I worry that I'm going to increase my mentally afflicted states? Or how much is my concern about, tomorrow's activity, the job, the relationship, the house, all that stuff that we go through. Matter of fact, I bet you a lot of us have a lot of concern just about, just the political stuff that's going on. We have concerns, which is pretty interesting. I've been noticing that in my own mind. So I watch listen to news, keep it in touch. And I've noticed that there's a whole bunch of news that's really not news. It's a bunch of people sitting around talking about what they think might happen. And it's all very interesting when you look at all the potentials, and then you look back the next day and, well, none of that happened. And so yesterday's news is really uninteresting, isn't it? Like all that stuff, who wants to watch 2 days ago news? It's like, why would I watch that? And yet they're talking today about the things that may or may not happen tomorrow. And we're very excited about it. And then whatever happens or doesn't happen today or tomorrow, does or doesn't happen, then it's obsolete. And so, but it's concerning. Well, I really want to know what may or may not happen tomorrow. And we don't know what may or may not happen tomorrow. It's this concern now. There's a concern and a tightness, and it actually creates a big stress. And then people spend hours listening to people talk about potentials of the things that may or may not happen, and speculate. There's whenever there's a meeting, they'll even have these guys bring on body language experts. What this handshake meant, and what all this, and just project all this stuff. And this is all just a mental concern. And is it a concern about liberation, noticing my mental afflictions and how I project upon things, how I get myself caught up in observing that. And that can be a practice if my concern was watching how I get hooked into that conversation and noticing the impermanence of how important me listening to this news discussion was today, and then noticing how irrelevant it is the next day. Now there's some insight there. And then the propensity to do it all again the next day. It's kind of nice to just read and see what actually does happen. And we have some news. Love it when they tell you 60% chance of rain. What's that mean? Might rain, might not. I'm from Southern California. We get very excited about that. You get storm watch. We get some rain. They'll be out on the corners with the news cameras, man. Storm watch. We got 2 inches of rain. It's happening. But at least that was happening. So the concern. Do we have a concern about all these worldly things that were all very transitory, all come and go, and none of which will attenuate my mental afflictions? It actually increases them. Versus a concern for my Dharma practice. In other words, what if my worldly actions were designed in a way to create space for my Dharma practice? And what if my Dharma practice was set up in a way that allowed me to do my worldly endeavors in a meaningful way? What if that was my concern? And that's what this Lojong text is that I can actually transform my work into my Dharma practice. If my concern's in the right place. If my concern's in watching my mind and how I attend to others, and watch whether I reify or worry about things that are very temporary, including a meal I might spend $50 on. When Dos Gringos burritos are like $7. They're pretty good. Yeah. And what's the difference between a $7 burrito and a $35, I did I'm not really good with food, but I was in Chicago and anyway, these people had bought me a meal. It was a very fancy kind of mushroom that's only around for a short period of time. You might know. Morels, yeah. And it was like $35 for these little mushrooms. And they were delicious. For, 5 minutes. I don't know. But that experience of deliciousness, I've also had that experience of deliciousness from a bean burrito I make at home. I like a lot too. And is this sensation is it going to really transform my life any more than this sensation? And yet how much energy can go around the build up, the energy around, just this right taste for this thing. So just noticing that in our mind, again, not to say you shouldn't enjoy these great mushrooms, or when we cook a meal, that's one of the things that we talked about before is when I cook a meal, am I cooking it to share it with others, out of love and kindness? Like, what's my motivation? Or do I want to dazzle them with my culinary skills and how, fancy I can do this? So where's our concern? And then the final example of contrariness is contrary rejoicing. Instead of rejoicing in the wholesome deeds of other sentient beings, the virtue of fully enlightened beings, we rejoice in the misfortune that comes to our enemies. And, I think we can all relate to that when they get theirs, And so, going back to the context, if I remember that, the real source of my suffering is always coming from my own self-cherishing. I'm the center of the universe. I'm looking out for me, and I think things should go the way I want and shouldn't go the way I don't want. And the things that make me feel good should last, and I want to avoid the things that don't make me feel good. This grasping, that is a constant wheel. The constant wheel. So that wheel, the wheel of life, the hub of that wheel of life that generates all of samsara, comes from no other place than me, starting with my misperception of self and grasping and attachment of the things that I really like, aversion of the things I don't like, and then my mind's just constantly on a wheel of seeking self-satisfying stuff, of what will make me feel good, even if it's only for a moment, and what will I want to avoid that I dislike. And then all the karma and afflictions and mental stresses, worries. And you can see how all of those contrarinesses focus on worldly concerns. Creates my suffering. But if I shift them to eliminating that grasping and that desire, and started with a very simple concern and a practice around cultivating contentment, the ability to be present, to not be pulled in every single impulse that arises in my mind, I might start to notice that my natural state is blissful, it's luminous, it's non-conceptual. In people that practice with, I don't think I've found anywhere in any teaching throughout any of the wisdom teachings throughout time where there's not an emphasis on simplicity of life for peace. I mean, you can go back to Confucius, you can go back anywhere. The simpler your life, the more contentment you're going to have, the more peace of mind you have. The more complicated our life, the more complicated our minds, the stressful stuff. So that's where I started with, is that our lives are actually much more complicated than they used to be, and we don't create the space. Back in with simpler lives, just whether we're having to get food out of the ground, have to walk places, we had space and time, and we had an ability to be more present and in tune with the cycles of life and nature, our thoughts and things that arise, and can think about things. How much do we actually have time to think about things in our lives? And how much of our mind is distracted by things we have to do, things that we have to read, things that we're hearing, news that's going on, things that we're doing? Where's the space? Where's that space? And then if we do get space, how quickly do we fill it up? It's amazing. I find that really fascinating how quickly. Got a day off. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? So these contrarinesses, you can see how they just go right back to, they're contrary to the path of awakening. They're contrary to well-being and inner peace. They're always focused on creating more of samsara. And so that's an analogy I like to use a lot, is people get so busy decorating samsara, they have no time to eliminate it. Because I'm really making samsara as nice as can be. So the next point here is don't be erratic. And they make a point here that it's I got to read one line in here because you don't hear this very often. They're making a point that Westerners tend to be more so. So I don't know if they're stereotyping, but But, we may practice mind training enthusiastically for weeks or months and then find that we haven't attained bodhicitta yet. I've done it 2 whole months. No bodhicitta. I'm not sure what's up. So then I try something else. And then I do another practice or I go to something else. And you'll see it all the time. A lot of people, they'll go to this center for a while. They'll try that teachings for a while or a different tradition. They'll go do something else. And then it doesn't really work out. Then they come back. So like here, now I come back to the mind training again. Then I try another technique. Then maybe I come back to mind training. After carrying on like this for a while, fiddlesticks. None of that stuff works. Let's go to a movie and forget about the whole business. I don't see fiddlesticks very often in a Dharma text, but that was great. Fiddlesticks. None of this stuff works. So this type of erratic discontinuity of practice is ineffective. Obviously we're not going to get far. We're going to keep sticking our toe and going back. And that's where last week I used the line where the Tibetan Lama says it's like we take a nice shower and then we go out and roll in the mud. Right, and then so now I'm muddy, so I go take a shower, and that's what tends to happen. People, and you'll notice just in general, people go to Dharma teachings for a while, and then life gets kind of okay, and then you know what happens. I'm off into samsara again, and then I get dirty, and I notice I'm dirty again. And I go, oh yeah, I should go back to that thing, And so this cycle that we get to. So here it's real clear. Don't be erratic. It means that we really want to have a concerted, steady effort. And a steady effort is one that, we're going to have ups and downs, and we're going to have days where I don't do my practice well, or I skip meditation. But a continuous effort is one that is always rooted in that I'm on a journey and I'm here for the duration. And I'm going to have my off days. Things are going to go right. But, I'm committed to continually confronting these aversions and doing the best and give myself a break when I don't. If we push too hard, that's a problem. That's brittle, right? We don't want to be brittle. We don't want to break. So it's really this steady, consistent, knowing that this all takes time, that I'm going to, the analogy I use a lot, push my marble out of the groove every day. Yeah, it'll fall back. I push it out again. So it's not that I need to be full gung-ho because you'll break. It's that, I'm still a knucklehead, but I'm working on it, and like I tell myself, I give, early on, I used to give myself credit for just wanting to meditate. And I just think that's so much better than beating myself up for not meditating. Because beating myself up for not meditating became, just this horrific relationship with meditation. Whereas if I, early on when I skipped a meditation, I just thought, but it's important to me, and I'm going to get to that later, and if not later, tomorrow. Like, it was still going to happen. I'm still going to do it. And I want to do it. At least I have a desire to do it, and that is a plus. So that's a steady, consistent, I'm going to keep working on this. Says we may have a fantastic technique and practice with gusto when we are in a conducive environment. But if the technique is all we have, our practice falls like a house of cards as soon as our supportive environment is missing. That's why we can do really good on retreat, and then we go home. Everybody's going, man, I need another retreat. So it's understanding that at home, how do I continually modify and create a little more space to keep this going? Which ties right into this next point, which we have time for. It's called practice decisively. So it's kind of that same thing. It's not erratic, but now practice decisively. And this is really where I wanted to focus on is those preliminary practices. I can practice decisively if I remember and know what the whole point is. That I am rooted, I really understand the nature of suffering. I understand that when I'm engaging in these other activities, I'm creating more desire and I'm actually creating more suffering. And if I understand cause and effect, if I understand how I'm generating this wheel, well then I'm ready to dive in and practice decisively. So unless I really have the proper foundation, I'm going to be erratic. I won't practice decisively. That can hold off. That can be all right. I'll just dabble in a little bit of, desire and attachment. And you know what I won't watch? I won't watch what I'm putting in my mind. And that is fascinating. Because we will be, think about how critical you'll be when you go to buy a car. How discerning you'll be. How discerning you'll be about what major you might take in college. Or what type of jacket you might buy. Think about the reviews that you might evaluate before you buy something. But how are we evaluating what I'm subjecting my mind to, what I'm watching on TV, what I'm listening to on the news, when I'm talking to someone, what I'm putting myself around? What am I putting into my mind? What are the thoughts that I'm nurturing and growing? Where's the discernment there? And if I don't realize that, wow, a lot of my talk and energy and things I'm doing is actually creating more desire and attachment and suffering and ill will and resentment and jealousy, I'm not very discerning about what I'm putting in. So decisively means that if there's this foundation that says, I can actually eliminate this. I can, and right at the start of the second point is, having obtained stability, let the mystery be revealed. And what they mean by that is the stability is, that I'm a pretty okay person. I'm balanced enough. I can show up to work. I'm not overly caught up in manic episodes. I've got some stability in just my humanness. And then the stability in the path, the understanding of the cause of suffering, the stability of understanding cause and effect, the stability in noting that the events that are taking place in my life, whether they're terrible or beneficial or so forth, has a lot to do with my attitude about how I'm projecting onto them. If I start to understand that with a sense of stability, well, then I can act decisively. Then I can say, you know what, this is a path I'm on. I can actually be on the path rather than be erratic. I can understand that, I'm going to have a lot of bumps in this road. I'm going to be full on sticking my thumb in my mouth, fetal, watching Netflix for 2 hours one day. And that's okay. That's just okay. That's just what I need right now. And that's okay, but it's not going to last. And when I get out of my fetal position, I'm going to go back and open up my text, or I'm going to do a little practice or do some prayers. Or I might need those days where, it's just overwhelming and I'm very human today. And that's okay. But there's an underlying knowing that that's a temporary state. And as soon as that overwhelming feeling goes, I'm getting up and I'm doing my practice and I'm meditating. And maybe it's only 5 minutes, and then maybe it's 10 minutes. But there's a decisiveness, a stability that shows up that says, I have my off times, and I'm going to get hit with feelings and emotions and afflictions. But they're going to be temporary. And you know what? Sometimes I'm going to give in, and sometimes I'm going to need to stick my thumb in my mouth and go fetal for a while and stay in bed all day. And that's okay. What's not okay is to beat yourself up for that. We're in samsara. We have conditioning. We have mental affliction. There are days where we just need that. And that's okay. But the decisiveness, the stability, is always a recognition that that's a temporary state. Yeah, I'm going to need a day like that. And then I'm going to get out of that. And I'm going to get a little better. Early on in my practice, about 17 years ago, I got hit, with a pretty severe depression going through. It was going through a divorce, and I had all what we would call clinical sort of depression, right? Low energy, couldn't stay focused. Everything was a real effort to do, and this went on for months. But I had enough Dharma practice at that point that it never felt like it was going to last. Like every day I thought, well, this is going to end at some point. And I was a single parent at the time, so it was helpful because my daughter was, I needed to be there. But it was to a point where I needed to tell my college professors that I can't concentrate very well. I need some accommodation. And I worked with them on that. And I did some things, and I was able to get through the school year. But as big as a task as that was, and for as long as it was, there was never a moment in my mind that I thought it would be like this forever. Like, I always knew that it could end any day, and that today could be the day. And that's the type of decisiveness that comes from a real depth of understanding of the path and the source of suffering, the impermanent nature of these mental afflictive states. And when you reach that even when it's to a degree where, like, we might even call something like that, there was never a sense of hopelessness. And that's the type of stability that we could have. That even though I can't do things very well, and even though things are an effort, and even though things can be overwhelming, underneath it all, there's still this very clear point that says this is just a temporary state. But the reason I got there was because of the preliminary practices. So having spent that time, that's why, we're going to get to a certain point that at the end he's going to say, what's my recommendation? Well, you go back and you do the preliminary practices, because that's the foundation for this. So, and even in this point of acting decisively, that decisiveness will come from a direct understanding of those 4 preliminary practices, this rare and precious opportunity that we have, the real impermanent nature of this opportunity and of thoughts and of feelings, the way cause and effect works, and the nature of the cause of our problems is unsatisfactoriness. When we really have an experience of that, then we have the stability, so the decisiveness to engage in this path. And so to remember that just because we have a Dharma teaching, or we do a great retreat, or we do a great meditation session, it's going to show up. Mental afflictions. And everything that he's talking about here in these points is about a stable, consistent trudging along. That's what these practices are for. To just keep reinforcing. Because we need all the help we can get. That's why we need to be around our community, our Buddhist community. Because we're here talking about this. When we're out doing other things at work and stuff, we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is desire and attachment and worldly concerns. That's what we do. So if our whole other part of our life is that, and we're not surrounding ourselves and putting like nice images of enlightened beings and things that we can do that create these conducive, these practices are ways to really support ourselves in that way. And so that's what they're engaged in. And apparently next week we're going to finish the last of them. So hopefully that's a good context for what these practices are for. They're always going back to noting and supporting ourselves, to coming back to remembering what the fundamental problem is. And the fundamental problem is not that I need something else. We have way more than we need. I don't need something else. And so I can have the patience directed in the right way. compassion in the right way, concern and aspiration in a way that's actually conducive to eliminating suffering instead of creating more of it. But unless we're thinking about it or meditating or bringing it to mind or talking about it, our mind's going to go pretty quickly to that other thing. Make sense? Okay. So let's do a dedication and really call to mind all those that are suffering. Let's dedicate the merit and wisdom we have accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes. Both collectively and individually, we dedicate our merit and our wisdom accumulated here for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. May we be able to use the merit and wisdom accumulated throughout our lifetimes to purify our own negativities, to cultivate the mind of awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. All right, thank you all for coming out on this holiday night, holiday week. Be well, trying to stay out of trouble. Thanks for joining us online.